Let's start with you, Brandy. What did you bring?
So I brought my dad's pay stub from 1988.
Pay stub from 1988. Ooh, okay. Can't wait to hear about that, what that's about.
Mhm.
And Janet, what did you bring?
So I brought a research paper of one of the students that I worked with. It's dated 2002. So yes, I have his research paper.
2002 research paper. I hope you're not trying to sell it, but we'll know more. We'll know more soon. First of all, welcome to the two of you, and welcome everyone who's tuned in to another episode of Not Quite Strangers. My name is Valerie Hope. I am your host, and this is an opportunity to bring two people together who are not quite strangers to have a conversation that inspires curiosity, builds connection, and who knows, might even challenge status quo. First of all, if you're not subscribed to Not Quite Strangers, please do so right now. You can go to www.notquitestrangers.com. And when you subscribe, you'll get every single episode in your inbox. You don't want to miss a single one. Also, you can go to the YouTube channel, Connect to Joy, and there you'll get a notification anytime a new video is posted. Today, I have such interesting special guests because it so happens that these two have been never introduced formally until today, but have been, it's been recommended on multiple occasions that the two of them meet, which I think is really quite fascinating. I have Brandy Cain, who Brandy, you and I met, oh my goodness, maybe 3 months ago. I don't know. And you can unmute. That's so funny. Both of you can unmute now. We're good. Yeah, like 3-4 months ago. And I can't even remember. Oh, it was Francois Booker Drew. So it was another podcast guest that I had my previous podcast who recommended that you and I connect. And we had this really beautiful conversation. I'm like, she's fascinating. And I think you need to meet Janet Morrison-Lane. And somehow the two of you were not able to connect. So I'm like, and Janet has been on the podcast before, my previous podcast, and as a dear friend. And I thought, this is meant to be, that the two of you should gather on Not Quite Strangers. So welcome to the show. And I do this not only in jest, but also because Brandy, your light sensors might go out, and I want to make sure that everybody knows if it goes dark, it's not, anything other than.
It's not another Texas winter storm.
Exactly, which everyone should know. We're all three of us happen to live in Dallas, Texas right now, but Brandy originally from North Carolina and Janet originally from Missouri. Now, let's talk about your objects. Let's start with that. So Brandy, what is this pay stub? Why did you connect that to my request to bring something that represented your why, or the type of work that you love doing?
Sure. So my parents had me at a very young age. And my dad had kept this pay stub, and as a kid growing up, I never really thought much about it. But now in my adult years, I see it as two things. I see it as one, like the amount of hard work that went into shaping me into who I am, and helping me become the adult that I am. And then I think about how it applies today, and that there are still other people who need to be supported and encouraged, because like me, they all have this overwhelming potential and this desire to give back to others. And I kind of see that pay stub as the chance to be like all of those people in my life who worked very hard to help me become who I am. And I see it as my chance to give back, and my responsibility to do more with my life as a result of all those people's hard work.
Wow. All right. I'm sure your dad is very proud.
I think so.
It's so much. In fact, he didn't even let you have the pay stuff. He's like, nope, stay right here in North Carolina.
After this, I don't know if I've ever told him that I think about it pretty often. I know he has it on his desk, and I think about that pretty often.
Yeah, you should tell him. I'm thinking,
Yeah.
I mean, if he's kept it, it's for a reason. And I'm sure it would be really meaningful for him to see that it's something that's impacted you still today.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thanks, Brandy. What
Yeah.
about you, Janet? What's this term paper that you're trying to sell?
We can sell it.
No.
Actually, and I guess I've got it here, but I'm going to keep the name down because I guess that would kind of breach somebody's confidentiality. But this was a paper from one of the kids that I worked with, and he was a junior at the time. And on his paper, you can see that it has 100, 100, 180. And that was the grade that he got on this paper. So he was so proud of this paper, and he brought it home so I could see it. And I looked through it, and there's not another mark on the paper. Like nowhere in there does it give comments or anything like, this is what you did well. This is what the hundreds are for. This is what the 80s for. And as I was reading it, there's a lot of, like misspelled words and punctuation and grammar errors and stuff like that. And he was in 11th grade. And I thought, why did he get 100? And he was so proud that he had gotten 100 because he knew how much that meant to me for them to like really work on their grades and stuff. And so I took that. I mean, I asked him to keep it, and I called the school and said, okay, can I meet with the principal about this? And she didn't have time for me. So she said, oh, we'll meet. And I think what she thought was that I was going to come in and argue that he should have a better grade. And I was like, no, I just want to have a conversation. And so then I got there, met with the curriculum instructor instead. The principal kept coming in and out of the meeting the whole time. So I don't know what that was about. But I was telling them, I said, this concerns me because he received all hundreds and an 80 on this, but there's nothing saying why. There's nothing saying what this is about. There's no commentary. And I felt like it was just, somebody that was patting him on the head to say, oh, good job, pass you along. And he didn't receive that academic instruction that he deserved. And so that really bothered me. I think when they figured out that I wasn't there trying to up his grade, I was actually wondering why it wasn't lower and why the person wasn't teaching more. But it's just one of the things. I mean, there's several things. I also have another that I didn't have an object for, but just that why of, because what I knew about him and what I know about a lot of young people is they have great capacity. And for us just to pat them on the head and say, way to go, good job, let's pass you on through, is doing a disservice to them and doing a disservice to just our society in general, because they deserve so much more. And we do, because they have a lot to offer that we will never know just because of the way, some of the, I don't know, individual system works, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's one that I hang on to and I just keep.
That was kind of a left turn for me. I got to say, I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. 100, 180, great. And then it's like, oh,
yeah,
now that's a pain. That's a shame that happened.
Frustrating.
So,
I know, because I do want to be, and I am proud of him. He's like in his 30s now. I'm very proud of him, but he was so proud of that. And I hated to, I had to tell him like, okay, it's not worth that.
No, but I think what I hear in your sharing is that there's an accountability, right? Accountability from the educators to make sure that the students are really receiving the quality of education instruction that they deserve, to your point. And that he also, as a student, as proud as he was, to also know what he did well that he can continue to emulate or correct. And yeah, I work with a lot of adult learners, right? And adult leaders. And some of those things that happen very early on in their education comes to bear at some point in time in professional career. You both, I'm sure, are aware of that, and you probably experienced working with people who are like, seriously, we're dealing with this here now at this point in time.
I think the other thing that struck me with him was that he recognized he had some, he was hanging out with some other kids in the neighborhood that weren't always the best influence, and all this stuff. And he had built this reputation, but he recognized that teachers were just passing him on. He knew that. He was like, they're just passing me on because they don't want to deal with me.
Wow.
So,
yeah, people still do that in the workplace too. I worked in HR for a long time. So It happens. So I'm curious, Brandy, you mentioned, hard work being a really important piece to who you've, the models that you've had in your life. So what is it that you work hard at? Like when you think hard work and dedication, like what is it that you like to devote your time, energy, and passion towards?
You know, I'm one of those people where like naturally, like I'll hear, throughout this conversation, you'll say, oh, I want to do X. And I'm very much one of those people who's like, I will find a way to help you do that. And my husband jokes pretty often. He's like, if you wanted to be an underwater butterfly farmer, she would find the way to know the person who has the butterflies, can get you underwater. And I take kind of joy in that. And I really, I want to dedicate my time and my energy into helping people who want to be better and who want to do better, who have noble ambitions and contribute meaningfully to that in whatever way that looks like. And that's like I take such I could work all day on things like that without noticing time passing.
That's interesting. Underwater butterfly farmer. It's very, very specific. But no, I get that. It sounds like for you is you really the payoff is to provide opportunities for people, provide resources, access, that sort of thing. Fantastic. I'm curious, when you think about something that you've worked tirelessly for, that you've accomplished, what comes to mind? Like who or what situation do you feel like, oh, I really had a hand in that, or I really I put my best foot forward in helping provide this?
Sure. So I ran a nonprofit for wounded veterans and their families for 3.5 years, and really saw like what happens when you dedicate yourself to a cause that's greater than you for a substantial amount of time, and when it really becomes kind of ingrained in who you are as a person. And saw the organization grow and saw the people in it grow and the people that we helped grow. And so that's really like something that I can kind of stake my flag in, is that, I provided a lot of opportunity for really great people who've done a lot for our country. But I think the byproduct of that is really what matters the most to me, is that we not only had amazing constituents that we served, but also that we had volunteers who were impacted, or people who identified with their service for the first time in a long time, employees who were able to grow professionally and personally, and those extra byproducts are just even more greater things. And I just kind of had those different moments throughout my career and throughout my life where maybe I volunteered for something or served on a committee or done something in that capacity. And that's really, it's just been a constant theme.
I love that. I think it sounds like that's not only a payoff for you, but there's so many, the ripple effect, right? That one gesture, that one moment, one resource can create really a snowball of opportunity in another person's world. And we never really know. Like if you were to think back, and I think this is the other piece of this podcast is not quite strangers. There might be someone who listens to this, any aspect of what we say, and go, oh my gosh, I just got an idea. Who knows what impact we have on people with what we say or what we do and where we extend ourselves could have. Yeah.
Do you know that story of, and they use this a lot in high school, and I don't know why.
The starfish?
Yes.
I'm like, oh, the starfish.
I
have actually, I'll have to find it, but I have a starfish that someone gave me to depict the difference that I made. So yeah, I know the starfish, but go ahead and share it for those that may not be familiar.
Sure. So it's the notion that there's a guy walking along the beach. There's a bunch of starfish that have all washed up on the shore. There's no way that this man can possibly in any way throw every starfish back in the water. And somebody stops him and says, why are you doing this? you're not going to possibly be able to save every single one of them. And he says, and he picks one up and he says, but for this one, I can make a difference.
Mm.
And so I love that. And Janet, I'm sure you see the same thing, that, you know, in these little moments, you can make a difference for somebody, even if it's just for a moment in time.
Yeah, so it reminds me of two things. One, that is, that's always been one of my favorite stories. And I like to come back to it just when I think, you know, it's too big. And I'm like, okay, but you just do what you can. I mean, I know that there's systemic stuff that needs to change, but I also know that all I can do is what I can do. But the other thing that makes me think of is I have this, that should have been my object.
What?
So I have this necklace. Actually, I kind of started to wear it with the sweater, but I didn't. But there's this necklace, and I can't remember, Compelling Creations. There's a plug for Compelling Creations. Some lady that she makes jewelry and has I love messages, like things that have meaning. And so this piece of jewelry has a handprint in the middle, and then it has little rings around it. And it actually is my tattoo now. But this handprint, it says on the little card that came with it, it said something like, the people that you touch it's like a ripple effect. And this is hers was way more succinct, but this is how I, read it, feel about it. It's like the people that you touch, they have a ripple effect. And I always have thought with the programs that I do, because I've learned later on, like way after a kid has been in our elementary school program, has gone to high school, has gone, maybe off to college, maybe not. And then they'll, I found out things that they did, like the way they connected with some other kid. One of the girls I found that used to be in our program and she was a teen teacher in one of our programs. And, a few years after she had gone, I found this journal, and I realized that she was writing back and forth to one of the younger kids, and just to inspire them and to do. And I thought those are things that, like, the metrics that, nonprofits are all, that has become hyper, whatever, to the, okay, you have to have metrics, and I always think of that. And I think that ripple effect is so much more powerful than anything a metric can describe, a one sheet of paper could ever describe. And so I get really frustrated with metrics, because I think, the work that we do is so much bigger than an improvement that happens in, 1 year or something like that. But that necklace it just really resonated with me. And so when I finally got my tattoo at 40, it was all about that ripple effect.
So Brandy, you can get a starfish tattoo because Janet now has.
We'll go together.
There you go. And now you can have something else.
So the podcast now has to be sponsored by a tattoo shop. This is a perfect plug.
Hey,
there you go.
So here's something I didn't ask you guys in the very beginning. We have a little prep time before we go live. And I like to ask my guests, why did you say yes to being on the podcast and then to meeting a complete stranger? So let's just start with that. I'm curious, what had you say yes to the invitation?
I trust you.
Thank you. Okay.
And it's fun. These are like these are those like unique experiences in life where you're kind of like, let's go for it.
Let's do it. Well, I'm touched that you say that, because we literally had, Brandy and I have spoken a total of like 1.5 times or so. But yeah, it was like, oh my gosh, I get her. All right, I appreciate that.
I mean, I think anytime Valerie asks me to do something, I'm like, okay, let's go. The other thing, I mean, also when you were talking, Brandy, made me think of, I'm a networker. And so, what was it again? Underwater butterfly fishing, underwater butterfly farming, whatever that was. I'm like, that sounds really cool. Can we connect on that so that I can have that, introduce that to my scholars? Because I really think that this could be a new field that nobody has ever ventured into and they might like. So I like the networking opportunities, and I know Valerie does, and I know she knows me enough to know that, okay, anytime I can network, I'm in. And so yeah, I'm thinking if you like connecting people to, like, you can make things happen, and I'm like, I like to connect people to the students that can make things, that we get things happening. So yeah, that wasn't, not that I knew that you really were all about butterfly underwater farming thing, but now
You started a brand.
Yeah, interesting. So
That's going to be my podcast.
That's your tattoo. So just for a frame of reference, I was the second person to say that the two of you should to meet one another, right? So I'm curious, what was it that the first, if you remember, I know it's been a few months, but if you remember, what was the initial meeting supposed to be, or what was the purpose? You don't remember?
I don't know. Somebody, I'm trying to think who that was. Somebody sent me who was it?
Was it Michelle?
Michelle who?
Bobadilla?
Maybe that was it. That could be, because somebody sent me an email, and I think that is right. Somebody sent me an email and said, hey, you two should connect because Brandy's doing this over here with the Bush Library, and you're doing this in Vickery Meadow. And so, maybe you guys should connect because we're right down the street from each other. And I think I replied to that, but it was like way later, or something, and was like, hey, let's connect. And then, yeah, it just kind of,
and then we couldn't.
Yeah, somehow it didn't do this. And then Valerie was saying, oh, Janet, you should connect with, and I'm like, I think you've told me this before, because I was thinking that she must have been Michelle, okay, I think maybe you've told me this before. And so I went back and I was like, no, it wasn't you. Oh my gosh, that's weird. There's somebody else that.
It was like ding, ding, ding. The universe is wanting the two of you to do something, to meet.
So I figure if 2 or 3 or 4 people are saying, all at different times, then okay, maybe there's something there.
2, 3, 4. No, like 2.
You never know.
One, it depends on the source.
If we had waited long enough, there may be like other people.
There could have been. So I'm curious, what was it that you think you guys needed to meet about? I mean, it doesn't have to be anything specific, but so obviously you had a couple of people that said, yes, you should meet. This happens in life, right? It's like, oh, you should meet so-and-so. Sometimes I'm like, really, I should? Why? So I like to have a compelling reason why. So I'm curious, what was your compelling reason, you think? Or what was the compelling reason presented?
Yeah, isn't your office close to mine?
It is, and I don't know how much you're at liberty to say on this, but so my understanding was that you're doing something with the Bush Library that has to do with immigrants, and a lot of my stuff, I'm in Vickery Meadow, which 60% or better of our scholars, because I run a college readiness program, and 60% or better of our scholars are immigrants. Many of them very new to the country. And so, yeah, I wasn't exactly sure what you guys are doing over there, but we are like literally 5 minutes up the street from each other. So, or well, up the highway, I guess, but not far. And so that was kind of seemed to be a natural connection because it is the Bush Library, and, we're an academic program, we're an educational, I shouldn't say academic, but we're an educational program. We're broader than just academic, but yeah. So that was kind of my thinking was, okay, let me see what's going on, and let's see and that's kind of my approach to life, I guess, is, okay, what are you doing? What are you already doing? What do you do well? And how can I connect that with what I'm doing, or with what our scholars maybe need or want and don't know they want, because we've never had this kind of connection before. And so just see where it goes.
I like that. So I'm curious, Brandy, for you then, you've got to meet a lot of people, right? Not only as part of your job, but it sounds like it's part of your personality too, right? So what is your criteria, if I could use that word, what is your when you say, yeah, let's meet or let's have a conversation, like what's the filter you use to determine whether you say yes or no?
I don't know that I don't know that I ever say no, and maybe I should start saying no. I sometimes it's like who's sending the introduction. But I also do this weird thing. I don't know why I do this, but like I can remember, if Janet says one of my students is really interested in X, Y, and Z, I will remember somebody I met 6 years ago at a coffee shop in the middle of somewhere who's doing that thing. And if they're still doing it, like I have no fear in sending a message and going, hey, Janet, who I really like and trust and think is wonderful, is doing this thing and needs this. Here's an opportunity for you to help and for you to make the world a little bit of a better place. I don't know how I do that or why, but it's really fun. Like, yeah,
I have a little of that. Yeah, I totally get that. I have a little bit. I don't know if I have the memory that you mentioned like 6 years ago.
But you have the connections, and that's what always, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like what I do with that, like I take, because Valerie, you've done this for me a lot with connecting me with people. In fact, I've got 2 people on my list that I connected with last year that I'm like, okay, now it's time to go back. But I think what I do, and like to your point, Brandy, of you could do it forever. And, just kind of, I mean, I feel like what I like to do and really could do for a long time is when I meet with people like that, sometimes they want to do something, but they're like, okay, well, sure, I could come and speak to your students. I'm like, that's kind of not exactly, but I can help them frame it to where it becomes like more, I help them see the perspective of, say, a student. And so like I've had meetings with people in the medical field who are like, okay, well, I can come be a speaker, a career speaker. And I'm like, oh, that's probably not going to be what they're going to be really piqued. But hey, I've seen that they have oranges that you can give shots to, or, they can do sutures on a banana or something. And they're like, oh, well, maybe we could do a stethoscope and maybe they could take temperatures and blood pressure. I'm like, yeah, there we go. So I don't know the answers, but I know enough, or have, can intrigue them enough to write. Like I learned, I guess, when I worked at the last nonprofit that I worked at, that just because somebody wants to volunteer doesn't mean that they have to shape that conversation, because people who want to volunteer don't necessarily know. I mean, what they know is, I'll pick up trash out in the field. I'm like, but we really don't need that. But they, so here, let me help you frame this. And then if you want to participate with that. So I try to kind of connect with people's strengths and fit them into that. But yeah, so, but I don't have a memory. I have no memory past like yesterday. So.
My mom, Brandon, were you going to say something?
No.
Oh, I was just going to share. My mom had this thing, and I may have shared this with both of you at some point, but when I have 3 brothers. And so when the 4 of us were on summer breaks from school, this was as early as I think junior high is what I remember. But we would have the summer, she'd say, you have 2 weeks where you can do anything you want. You can eat breakfast for lunch and dinner if you want. You can stay up all night and play video games or watch TV. I don't care. You get 2 weeks off. And after those 2 weeks, you better go find something to do, or I will find something for you. And so at first we were just like, okay, yeah, whatever, Mom. Oh, and she found stuff for us to do. Like I had to put together the Dewey Decimal System at my church's library. And when I had that experience, I'm like, I will find something else to do next time, because that was like painful. But what it really taught me, every single summer, she would empower us to seek things that we were interested in. Find someone to, volunteer with. My brothers were all Eagle Scouts, are all Eagle Scouts, but they had to like build up to that. And every summer they would do something with Boy Scouts, or they'd do something for the community or whatever. I got to be a little bit more creative because I wasn't necessarily in the scouting system anymore, but it was interesting that my relationship to volunteer work was not like do some sort of whatever they need. I was always very strategic. I'm like, I like working with people, so I want to do something like that. Or I've never done this before, so let me try this. So I've had all kinds of interesting volunteer jobs, but funny enough, I had a conversation today with someone who's looking to get into a field. I think it was finance and accounting. And what was interesting is we were starting to talk about networking. And he said, so how do you reach out to people on LinkedIn and whatever? And I'm like, I don't reach out to people on LinkedIn, not like that. So I want to hear your strategies, because this seems to be that both of you are really adept at networking and you're people. But what I took away from his question was, how do you connect with people in meaningful ways? And this is something that I do quite instinctively, but I said, no, you don't just, I can't, truth be told, I don't like when people randomly reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you don't know me or you haven't seen something I do or whatever. So if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, hey, Valerie, I watched your podcast and this is what I learned, or here's something that was interesting, or so-and-so Janet said, or Brandy said, that's a really nice way in, not a cold reach, right? That's number one, like a warm something. And then the other thing is also finding ways to, what I shared with him is most of the job opportunities I've had, like the really wonderful opportunities, volunteer work was like an audition for that. Where people saw me in action doing something that I, first of all, always did things that I loved or somewhat good at, or found myself learning very quickly. And so I got to show my best self in action. And those were the type of people that would say, Valerie, you should try XYZ, right? And so those are the things, those volunteer opportunities, which I know the two of you know quite a lot about, but also networking, those are really powerful in combination. So I'm curious for you guys, how has that influence you in your, maybe in the career that you have, or the way in which you exercise what you do? If at all, I don't know.
Oh, I guess for me, it's just in conversation. Like, I don't like cold. I mean, some people are really good at that. Like, just, hey, I don't mind asking somebody for, donations. I'll just call and what can they say? No. I hate that. I want to know. I always have to have, even like going, like I'm not the party person, I'm the wallflower, which I know sounds, for people that know me, think, okay, no, you're not, because I talk to everybody, but I don't like cold situations, like just walking in. So like if I go to a party, I may tag along with you, Valerie, so that, because I know that Valerie knows people at this party and she's going to introduce me. And so once you introduce me, then I can pick up on, and maybe that's the answer to this, like, okay, Valerie's going to introduce me to Brandy, and then I can figure out from there. But for me to just call Brandy out of the blue, and it kind of depends, but it's more like what you said, like I have to have a connection to that. I want to have a connection to that. It's better for me if I do. And so I like to connect through friends and it can be friends of friends of friends, like, hey, here's this person who has this, do you want to talk? And then usually it's just kind of like, I feel like it's like a spider network, like you get connected to people that you wouldn't normally be connected to, just by, kind of, I don't know, I listen and try to figure out, like, what are they good at? What do they, and what do we need? And how can I connect that?
Brandy, what about for you?
So going back to like the volunteerism piece, so I actually got my last job because I asked to volunteer. So not my current one, but the one I had before this. And the reason being is because the reason I asked to volunteer was really because I knew that I had the capacity to make a difference in some sort of way. And went into it with pure intentions of, you obviously need help, and I'm have an able and capable pair of hands, and I'm happy to do it. When it comes to meaningful connections, I think it doesn't happen instantly. And I think the situations where I've had connections that were really meaningful and that went from maybe a like cold or warm kind of situation into a really good, meaningful relationship. It's just going into it with sort of a curiosity, but also in the sense of wanting to have that relationship with that person. My best friend will tell you that she imprinted on me, and she was like, that girl's going to be my friend and I'm going to make her my friend. But I also went into
I don't know. I'm not sure if it's an or.
No. So, like, you know, and I think we all empathize with this, that like as we get a little bit older, like female friendships are harder to maintain as we kind of like things start to stack on in life.
Mm.
But I also went into that relationship with like, okay, I'm willing to meaningfully contribute to you because you're willing to meaningfully contribute to me. And I just kind of like that, those are the best relationships. Now, where I am maybe not the best person is when somebody just cold reaches out to me and just flat out asks me for something with no context, with no interaction otherwise.
Mhm.
And that's when I'm kind of like, oh, really?
Try a little harder.
Yeah.
I'm with you. This year, I've recently started taking on LinkedIn when I get people maybe soliciting, probably, right, for business opportunities. You know, I'm a leadership coach and a speaker. And so people reach out saying, hey, we can expand your client base, or, you know, that kind of stuff. And when they request a connection, number one, and there's no message whatsoever, but I see like what they do. And I'm like, yeah, thank you, but no thanks. So no message, no accepting. And the second thing is if they have a request and they have only like, here's what I do, or it feels like there's incomplete information. Like there's incomplete kind of like, hey, I noticed what you're doing and it sounds really cool. I'd love to talk to you sometime. And I'm like, about what? What exactly? And I'm like, I appreciate the offer. Now I started to write back, hey, I appreciate the offer. I don't think what you're offering really aligns with what I'm looking for. So thanks, no thanks. So I took that on this year, that I'm starting to ignore, like literally click ignore rather than just let them stack up in my invitations. And I do the same with Facebook. I'm so sorry. I know I might be like public light figure now doing podcasts all the time, but if I don't know you and there's not been an actual warm introduction, sorry, you don't get to be my friend. You can follow me, please support, but and I don't feel bad saying that, because I do from the heart really want to connect with people, but in meaningful ways. I think that's the most important piece. And that's why I think, you know, something like this podcast really spoke to me, that the two of you had something. And it wasn't even just the superficial connection of like what you do and how you can support each other, but both of you bring so much heart and a spirited approach to what you do, that I was like, yeah, you guys are, you know, kindred spirits in that. Now, you may not imprint on each other, and I'm okay with that.
Thanks for that you said that.
No need to imprint. So what would you like, you know, when you said yes to this, what would you want to get out of a conversation like this, for example? If there was something in your mind about it, even now, after hearing what you've each said, what would that be?
I mean, I feel like Janet, I feel like you and I could just go get tattoos and like hang out now.
Boom.
Well, Valerie has to come. Like, that's the thing. Like,
Tattoos won't show that nicely on me. I don't think so.
Oh
but
yeah, I've researched it. You can get like there's a white tattoo that you could get if you really wanted it to show, but you can get other tattoos too.
Oh, interesting. Okay. We'll see.
And
We'll talk.
And I feel like Janet too, like I feel like with at least having this conversation now, like as we both identify things and see things and want to be a part of things, I feel like it'll be easy for you and I to go, hey, like, are you part of this? Are you doing this? Like, okay, I know what work you're doing. It makes collaboration a lot easier.
Yeah.
I think it kind of reminds me, and I know my husband's probably going to watch this later, and then he's going to be like, why did you say this? But this,
it wasn't my fault, Billy. I had nothing to do with it.
But I think, so I, you know, just as far as networking and stuff, because I'm not like that person that can go hang out at a party and just kind of be like, I don't know, I just don't like that. It just kind of, so I always approach things from like a I feel like from a business deal almost. And so yeah, like when Valerie said where you work and what you do, and I thought, okay, we can connect on that. And so and that's the way Valerie and I connected. I mean, we connected through like a conversation about the scholars first, and then formed this budding friendship that has been going on for like 3 years now, something like that. And so I know that before my husband, when I was doing people are like, you need to find somebody, which I'm not a big, like, let me go out and find somebody to date and marry or whatever. But I did connect with, I was trying to do eHarmony. It lasted for like 6 months. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. But what I found about myself was trying to connect with people. I remember meeting up with this one guy, and I met him at Starbucks, but I had researched his little profile, and I was like, oh, he had created a daycare, like he had started his own business. So since I work with young people, that's all I could so tell me about this business. So how do you, my brain is like, how can I connect this with, with what I'm doing, and how can I, and yeah, it's not always the best way to do things, especially when you're trying to date people.
Romantic match. And you're like,
luckily I have, my husband and I go way further back than that, and we are good at we connect on many more levels. But to be honest, we connected through work originally too. So I mean, for me, that's the natural connection, but then it kind of moves into it. So yeah, like to your point, Brandy, about we could go get tattoos. I'm thinking, okay, well, I originally kind of came to this because of what Valerie said about what you do, where you are, what I do, and how this can connect. And then now it's like you kind of see, oh, well, okay, well, we could connect on these things too, so it kind of morphs into something else that could be more of a, either an ongoing friendship, or just even like I'm the type of person that connects with people randomly, like 6 months later, it's like, hey, what do you, whatever. And and we just reconnect and we keep on going. And yeah, it's not like I have to see you every 5 seconds as Valerie does, because we've been trying to connect.
She's not clingy, Brandy. She's safe. She's like,
so you're good. You're not going to tread on her territory.
But Dana, back to your point. So I remember very distinctly, I was at an event and I overheard some younger professionals talking about how much they wish they had mentorship when they were young from other professionals. It happened to be a group of women whose parents were immigrants into the US. And I remember feeling like, well, I'm an immigrant, and yeah, I've had so much support, not only because my mother was super resourceful, but all the people that we connected with always gave us, we met a lot of Brandys along the way, right? People providing opportunities and direction, information. I'm like, I should do that too. And it specifically happened because I started my own business and knew that now I had to switch the brain from offering what I do well as part of my corporate job, which I had at one point, where I wasn't having to sell it. It was like a package. This is what I do. So I come and I do coaching, or I come and facilitate a workshop, but now having to sell it gave a whole different energy to how I had to connect with people. But when they said this, I thought, you know what I'm not doing? I'm not offering, I'm asking, right? So when she mentioned mentoring, I overheard that. I reached out to my own mentor, Patty Clapp. Yay, Patty. She was my boss when I worked at the Dallas Chamber of Commerce, the Dallas Regional Chamber. And it was funny because the first thing she said, I said, I'd love to work with people in the immigrant community, maybe, I don't know to what capacity, but young people, high school, college, or something. Who do you know? She's like, talk to Janet Morrison-Lane. And so when Janet and I connected, had this great conversation, hit it off immediately. It was all about public speaking. I said, I can come and do some public speaking. But what I don't know if you knew, Janet, I got my first paid gig as a speaker because of my Eagle Scholars connection.
I had no idea.
Because one of the other mentors who saw me do what I do over the first couple months or whatever, he's like, hey, I have an organization that's looking for someone to teach some public speaking. Would you be down for that? And I was like, my gosh, first paid gig for speaking came out of that. Again, volunteerism, right? And the opportunity to show and shine in ways that are meaningful and connect in meaningful ways with people will always win out. And I mean, this is just, the ripple effect has continued since then. So thank you.
Never knew that.
I didn't, yeah, I thought, I'm like, I don't think she knows. So there you
Okay.
go. Like Brandy's dad doesn't know about the page sub, so.
And that's why I think ripple effects are so important, because I mean, you didn't have to tell me that, and we may have gone through our whole friendship and I never knew that, but it did influence and enhance your life, and I think that's what is just invaluable about I don't know, about that whole starfish kind of thing, is because it's just about, continuing to, I guess, put greatness into the universe, and then, whatever, connect people, do things. And then, yeah, I know that there's like certain things that you can't do just by an individual, but I still think that it's just valuable. And I love to see how other people, years later, because I've been working with young people for 25 years now. And so just the things that I hear about how great they are, I like to think that somehow I had, an impact early on to where they're continuing that. Doesn't mean that, I mean, they may go off and they usually do a whole lot greater things than, because they take it and run with it. But how awesome is that? So
yeah,
I'm good with that.
It's like trying to identify which drop of rain had the biggest impact on the growth of this plant. There's no way to determine that. But the idea is that you got to water it. You got to water it. And I think that's the two of you I can get in what you do and how you go about doing it, that you're there about really nurturing, watering those plants, like whenever you have the resources to provide them. So now I'm curious, when I switch gears a little bit, love to hear, what's it been like having this? I know, Brandy, you're like, make sure this light doesn't go off. Although it looks kind of nice, it's kind of mysterious when it goes out. It doesn't, you can let it go out. It's fine. You can still see it. I'm just curious about your experience here, based on what you expected, right? What you shared a little bit already, to what's this been like, having a meeting in a public forum like a podcast? What's that been like?
It's fun. I think for me, like, I want to know more about you, Janet, of like, just like, you're kind of like, are you married? Do you have kids? Like, where did you grow up? Those kind of things. And those are just details we can get, in another Zoom chat of just you and me.
What? I'm not invited? I'm kidding.
So,
totally good. This is what I want. Just spark the light the match. That's all. They're good.
And I think it's awkward as all get out that my lights keep going off, and that, but that's the technical world that we're living in these days. So we can roll with it.
It was either you rolling back and forth in your chair or going clap.
Clap on.
So
that's good. And yes, we didn't get into a lot of the personal details, and I'm sure that is definitely a big part of connecting with somebody. But yeah, definitely next time you guys can continue. Janet, what about for you? What was this experience like?
I think the longer it goes on, it's like, at the beginning, I'm kind of like, okay, I know we're on camera, and how much do I need to let Valerie just like guide this conversation? And how much do I just need, because I would normally just like jump in and, whatever. And so I'm aware that we're on a podcast. And so when you say that, Brandy, about like, I want to know about your family, I'm like, yeah, let's, but it's like, okay, let's do that offline. Let's, like, we can do more of the like get to know you. So it is a little bit like, I'm aware that there is an audience on here. And so how much should I say, or how much should I not say? Because this will be recorded. And in the day of technology, nothing is ever deleted. Exactly. It's forever. So, but just the introduction and kind of it's like the start. It's like an opportunity to now, kind of move into like, okay, in the day when Starbucks opens back up, let's go to Starbucks and kind of, and chat or whatever. And let's see what happens. Let's see what kind of evolves because of that. So.
And I'm not sponsored by Starbucks or any other brands. Doesn't have to be Starbucks, it can be any rando coffee shop.
Any coffee shop. And we may just have, I was going to say on Zoom, but then that's branding too. We're not giving Zoom all of that. We're just going to have, we could have our own cup of coffee in our own houses on some video chat.
There you go. A phone call. Y'all are
You're
silly.
platform agnostic.
Platform agnostic. True that. What's been the biggest surprise out of this conversation?
I mean, we are not quite strangers. Like if I were to pass you on the street before this, like I wouldn't have known you from Adam, what is it? Adam's house
Eve.
cat, Tom's house cat, something like that.
There's a house cat? I've
Never
never heard
heard
that.
of it as a house cat.
It's like Adam's house cat. I think that I'll send it to you afterwards.
Wow. I've never heard of that.
But I wouldn't have known you, right? And so now I know more about why you do the things that you do and like what you believe in. And I think that's really valuable. I mean, even more valuable than knowing the who, what, when, where, why, like what the, are you married, those basic demos. And I think that that's really, we aren't that different.
I think, yeah, so I'm going to say something that it'll be recorded forever and I'll probably be like, oh, but so one of the things, this isn't the part that I'll say about that, but the first thing that I think is really, I like a whole lot is the object. I struggled with like what to bring as the object, but it reminds me of, and Valerie, you and I have done this in different capacities. I mean, I think with each other, but also with our own families, of having this scavenger hunt where they go and bring back an object that's like something you love and something that's meaningful, something that inspires you. And I find that those are so powerful because you get a different level of a person. And so yeah, here's the part that I'm like, maybe I should or shouldn't say this, but the fact that you're connected with the Bush Library is kind of counter of all of my politics. So I think that, and so that, that's in my head, regardless of who you are or what you do or what you believe, it's still in my head. And so having that object and starting off with that is really, it's a cool way to kind of go to a deeper level with, to start with a core rather than, a lot of times what we do, my daughter hates it when people ask her like, what grade are you in? Are you in sports? Are you in all of this? She's like, please, why do they keep asking me this stuff? And we, and I've told her, okay, that's the way we do. It's kind of like how we get to, we kind of get past those little superficial things to kind of figure out how to dig deeper. So the object kind of gives, because just like, I know I threw you for a loop there, Valerie, and you've known me, and so it's just kind of a deeper level that you get to connect with somebody and see, and which I think can sometimes change that conversation, regardless of, the politics or the, belief systems or, whatever it is, religion, any of the controversial stuff. It doesn't mean we necessarily will become BFFs or like, whatever, but it just gives a different kind of lends a little different light to the whole situation.
So okay, Brandy, I'm super curious. What are you going to say?
Well, I think the neat part about this, right, is so for me, you might say like, why would somebody go work for a political organization in 2020, right? Worst idea ever. And
or best time ever. I mean, there's such a spotlight. There's such a strong connection to.
Either way, it's polar. It's not. There's nothing in the middle there.
Yeah, and so really, like, what I spend my energy is really less about like the political side of things. My mindset with like going into this or really anything I do is like best idea wins.
Best idea wins. I like that.
And I don't consider myself like a very partisan person. Like I don't care who you are. If you're willing to contribute to society in whatever way that looks like, however you show up, I'm here to root for you and I'm here to support you. Um, Politics stuff aside, and I kind of knew that going into this and into this job, um, because you would either get one of two things: somebody who is very happy to meet you and thinks that like this is the greatest thing ever, right? And maybe it aligns with their political beliefs, or somebody's like, I will never have a conversation with you because I think that your political leanings are whatever kind of situation.
Mhm.
And I consider it my opportunity to show them that like this, what I do as a person doesn't have to be political.
Yeah.
Um, and the things that I support and the things that I um, am involved in does not have to, my role doesn't have to be a political role. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And Brandy, maybe just to give people some context, can you share what you do with the Bush Library? Because I think we've been kind of like, well, you don't really want to talk about all of
So
that.
I am marketing and community relations for the Bush Institute and the Bush Library. So there's like two sides of the house. Um, and so those are, I work on everything from promoting white papers and studies and information about just different things around the world. So it could be education reform, it could be what's happening in Burma right now, it could be supporting veterans and military families. It could be that the Laura Bush Foundation gives a grant out for schools to get books.
Mhm.
And so really like the part of my role that I've embraced is how can this organization take this work and this thought that we have about what we're doing and how can we meaningfully impact the community around us,
Mhm.
and recognize the work that is being done around us and consider that when we make recommendations or when we host speakers or when we amplify voices, like how can we use our platform to give other people access.
Mm. Love that. And I think the challenge, and what both of you have shared as far as the political side, I remember when I first joined Facebook and you know how they asked you like, your gender and like all these bio data kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
I remember writing where it said religious views, they have like all these different options and I put spiritual. So I'm like, yeah, very open when it comes to my spiritual beliefs. And then political views, and they had, liberal, conservative, or whatever. And I'm like, spiritual. Because I'm like, no, I may have opinions about different things at different times, but I really like to create a space, an open space to learn more about things that I don't know about. And it's funny, my dad shared with me recently, I guess in the last year or so, all this stuff that's been happening, the chaos around the political discourse this day. One of the things he always said is, he said, look, when people say I'm liberal, he's like, what are you trying to liberate? What is it that you want to liberate that's so important to you? And when people say I'm conservative, he goes, like, what is it that you want to conserve? And he said, that's going beyond the labels. And even when you said, Janet, about your daughter not wanting to be asked what grade she's in or if she plays sports. I mean, those are like such superficial ways to get to know someone and what we're about and why we do the things we do, that I really challenge myself as much as I can to like, okay, how do I go beyond the surface? Which is why I recommend, if you're going to reach out to someone on a social media platform, to go beyond the title that you see or the image that you see or whatever, jobs they've had, and really go, okay, what content are they posting? Like, is there an article they posted that was really interesting? Can you comment on that? Like, find ways to connect with people based on their ideas or based on who they are. And but I think that's, both of you are pointing to that. We use so many labels to shortcut, right? We just don't have to work as hard to try to suss out like, who do we want to connect with and who do we want to support, or how can we support, or right. But I think anything that we can do that gets beyond the surface, and that's how I feel I can contribute That's my gift. I believe I can contribute to the world, is helping people go beyond the surface in a meaningful way. And yes, it might be done in a very short period of time, and you guys will go find out whatever bio data you need for one another. And now there's probably more context to the labels, right? And that's, I think, what we miss. We get stuck on the label and then we dismiss people. But if we can just go beyond that and go, wow, you're dealing with that. Whoa, that's how you came to, be attracted to this particular organization or this particular ideology or whatever. So okay, I'll get off my soapbox, but we could, as we already said, could talk for much longer than we have time for. But first of all, just want to say thank you to the two of you for saying yes, for being on the podcast, sharing what you shared. Janet, even against the the wishes of your husband, sharing things that you think would have embarrassed him. I appreciate that. And Brandy, waving your arms, rocking back and forth, trying to keep those lights on, whatever work. I appreciate your commitment to still engaging in the conversation in spite of all the other stuff you had to do. So any final thoughts that you want to share before we log off?
I just kind of feel like I want to start putting in my little Zoom meetings, like on the description, like, please bring an object to share with me at the beginning of our conversation.
You could just ask people about what they have in their room. Yeah. Just say, hey, so
I love that. I mean, I really just love how that works.
You take it, borrow it, steal it. Well, don't steal it, but ask about it.
Use it.
Use it. Brandy, what about you? Any thoughts?
Well, thank you. First of all, I just appreciate that you hold a space for these types of conversations. And I appreciate that. I know a lot of energy and work goes into it, and I can appreciate that and the positive effect it'll have on you and on others.
Thank you, Brandy. That's the hope. And I enjoy it so much. I get so much energy from this. So whatever is there to do or whatever ripple this will create, so be it. I think that's what our responsibility is, right? My favorite quote is from Howard Thurman: don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs are more people who have come alive. And that's where the ripples actually start. Sometimes we do things that don't make us come alive and we sink right to the bottom, right? But if we really want something to have an expansive impact, the more alive it is, the bigger the impact, right? So both of you, thank you kindly so much for your time, your energy, for your commitment. I'm so excited that you're going to continue the conversation beyond this. And for those of you who tuned in today, thanks again for joining us for this episode. Two things: make sure that you're subscribing so you don't miss a single episode. Go to notquitestrangers.com to do that, or you can go to YouTube and subscribe to the Connect to Joy channel. And another thing we've also put in place, these episodes are happening every other week. You'll get a new episode. In between those weeks, my friend Felipe and I, my partner in crime in Brazil, put together some connection challenges. So what you experience in observing someone connect with some not quite stranger, you can actually implement in your own life. So every other week, if you're subscribed, you will receive a Not Quite Strangers connection challenge, where you have the opportunity to now find some way, shape, or form to build your circle, right? And start creating your own ripples in your community. So hopefully you'll join us for that. And the final thing, a little extra surprise, quarterly, you'll look out for some Not Quite Stranger gatherings. We're going to actually invite the two of you, Janet and Brandy, back for a behind the scenes with other guests from the podcast. So if anyone is interested in finding out more and learning more about these individuals, and you have your own set of questions, stay tuned, and you'll see how you can join us for that event. All right, ladies, once again, thank you so much. So excited to have introduced the two of you finally, and look forward to even more. Everybody else, have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.
Bye.
You've been listening to the podcast Not Quite Strangers. Be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite video or podcast platform. And for more information and content, go to notquitestrangers.com. See you next time.